Well, we're in the house and we are going to install an Uponor fire sprinkler head above where the stove will be in the kitchen. I'm going to go into lots of details on all these components as we move through the video. Just know that for the first thing we need to do is get blocking in place or supports in place to position this T-assembly in the correct location above the stove. Now that we have the two cross members in place, we need to put a brace in here that the sprinkler head will actually attach to. That's the important part, the distance away from the front of the stove. So the sprinkler head needs to be between 1 and 2 feet away from the front of the stove. A standard stove is 25 inches deep. That means it's 25 inches away from the finished wall. So we have the backing here, the wall, and we'll have a 1/2 inch of sheetrock. So we need to be 25 inches, in this case, plus 1.5 feet. It's very important that it be out the correct distance because you'll have cabinets over here. If I were to just install this sprinkler right here, the cabinets would stop the water from getting on top of the sprinkler or on top of the fire over the stove. All right, so we've installed our brace. This is where the sprinkler head is going to be located. It is directly in front of the stove, and it is 1.5 feet away from the front of the stove in the ceiling. Now, it's very important that the bracket get mounted in the correct place in order to position the sprinkler head in the correct place for when the sheetrock is installed. So what I've done is I've taken the assembly and assembled it. So I have my T-assembly, my bracket installed, the sprinkler head, and the cover plate all put together very lightly, hand tight, not even hand tight, just together, just till they barely snug up. Once I've got that assembly done, I can hold it up here in place and determine the height it needs to be at in order to have the sprinkler head in the correct position when the sheetrock's installed. Grab the drill. Now that I have that in place, I'm going to disassemble this sprinkler head, pop the T-assembly out of the bracket, and put this last screw in nice and straight. So our bracket's installed, T-assembly is installed, snapped right into place. We're going to grab our yellow protector. Our yellow protector is installed. The yellow protective cap on this specific model has adjustment lines, and those lines need to fall within the thickness of the sheetrock in the bottom of the truss. In my case, this white 3/4 inch domestic water line will be cut. One side will come into here, and the other side will come into here. Well, we need to build the test assembly for the sprinkler head. So we have one of the sprinkler heads here with the protective cover on it. And we're going to leave it like that for now, because all I really need to do is know that this is a 1/2 inch connection. We're going to go ahead and assemble this. Once we get it put together, we'll go over the components that we used. There's the test assembly. This sprinkler head is a sacrificial sprinkler head, and it's actually part of the test assembly. But I'm not going to thread this in here until we build an adapter so that I can permanently install the correct head in the house when we get to that point. This is a 3-inch nipple, 1/2 inch black iron pipe. It goes to a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch reducer bushing to a 3/4 inch 90-degree throw valve. It's very important that this be a 90-degree throw, quick open valve for the test to work properly. 3/4 inch valve. This is a 3/4 inch 1-inch nipple to a 3/4 by 3/4 by 1/2 inch T. The 1/2 inch allows you to put a reducer in here to go to the gauge. Then we have another reducing bushing, so 3/4 to 1/2 inch, and then we have the sprinkler head itself, the sacrificial sprinkler head in this instance. For right now, I need to modify this socket, which is a 36 millimeter socket, to go inside of this sprinkler head to engage on these little flutes so that I can install the sprinkler head nice and tight once we do the final installation. The reason I'm modifying this socket is because the tool to install these sprinkler heads was $167 and this socket was $10. I'm going to cut slots in this socket on my portable bandsaw to make it work for my application. $10 or 167, I think. I don't remember. It was a lot. Okay, you guys are gonna have to work with me here. I realize this is a rinky-dink setup. It's a couple of 2x4s thrown together, but it serves a couple of purposes. One, I've never triggered a sprinkler head before. I doubt that you have either if you're watching this video. So I want to do that, but I want to do it outdoors where the water going everywhere doesn't really matter. Technically, triggering a sprinkler head isn't required to perform the test that this is going to be used for, but I want to do it just because I want to do it. The other is, I want to be able to understand what's going to happen when this thing goes off, when I open the valve in the house during the test, while I have that inspector standing there. I want to understand what's going to happen. I want to be over-prepared so that if there's a problem with my test rig or anything else, I know what to fix now before I call the inspector and have him come out and watch me do this in the house. We will film all that. I'll put that all out on the video. I'm also going to go ahead and mark the increments in the test barrel, which is required. All these things are really good for me to do outside where I can control the water and I don't make a giant mess in the house. I get used to the assembly. It'll make the test at the house go that much better, and I hope the video will provide you enough information to where you don't need to do this yourself, because I did it for you. Okay, so the water is on, the valve is shut. We're going to take the safety cap off. And you see the little sprinkler head has popped down. So when I turn this on, it should pressurize up against the back side of that. And it has. So it's reading 30 psi. The 30 psi should be more than adequate to trip this. We're going to have to throw this over to the side. That works surprisingly well. It broadcasts in a much larger area than I expected. I would say that broadcast area is at least 12 feet by 12 feet. I need to now figure out, because I don't want to spray all that water all over the house when we do this indoors. So now I need to figure out a sleeving system. All right, well, that's going to conclude the testing. I'm really glad I did it this way. I determined I only need this really short piece of plastic. I don't need a long sleeve like you see in some of the other videos. I do need to go do the 1 gallon increments on the drum. So I have determined that I'm going to change out this gauge. This gauge is 0 to 100 PSI. I just ordered a 0 to 60 PSI off Amazon. What I noticed on here is the needle was barely coming off of 0 when the water was flowing through here. It's very important that the needle go to the correct reading specification. There's criteria that the inspector is going to use to determine if your test is sat or not, and if you can't read the gauge well enough, he's not going to call the test sat. So it is very important you get the smallest increment gauge you can. The gauge needs to be within range of your water pressure, so in my case the max water pressure I expect to see here is 55 psi, and the same at my mother-in-law's. So a 0 to 60 gauge will work, but that really allows the needle to reflect more accurately at the lower range in this type of application. I will say that Pierce County here in Washington has a whole bunch of literature online under their fire inspection section and their fire installation section about how to build this rig. In fact, they provide pictures and written instructions. They also talk in detail about how the test needs to go. But I think we're done here, and we're going to go get this thing installed at the house and then call for the inspection. We have tied in the sprinkler head to the water main. Well, in this case, the water line is a 3/4 inch type A PEX system. And we have our test assembly, which is the valve, the nipple, the gauge, and the dummy, well, a real sprinkler head that I set off like you guys saw. And we're going to go ahead and take out the real sprinkler head and install the test fixture so we can get ready for the test. We have our test fixture. All right, so the gauge is showing and the valve is operable. Plastic bag to direct the water into the garbage can. One of the things we have to do is put the insulation up. We have to dome the insulation over this pipe. So in my case, I've got a exterior wall that the pipe runs into. So from the top of the exterior wall across the ceiling and down into the interior wall, we have to dome insulation over all that. So we're going to go ahead and do that. It's very important that there be an air gap between the finished sheetrock, or where the sheetrock will be, and the pipe, so that the insulation just sits on top of the pipe, so that when the house is heated like it would be normally, the heat will transfer through the sheetrock and keep the pipe warm to prevent it from freezing. It's going to be hard to see, but down in that garbage can, we have everything marked out. So that's 30 gallons, 25 gallons, 20 gallons, and each line in between is 1 gallon. So this garbage can gets positioned directly under that sprinkler head. I want to put this in perspective. One, I've got insulation alarm that happened today. Rough and electrical is done, and I have a plug-in, unfortunately, right next to where I'm going to stand. So I'm actually going to put my body between the water and the plug-in because I need the light for the camera to work. But all that said, it is 2.5, 3 weeks after you guys saw me trip that sprinkler head to see how the water was going to work. So we still have the same plastic bag on here, and we're going to see if that bag will control the water well enough to get our test done in our bucket. And I'm going to do a test run and get the air out of the system before the actual sprinkler test with the inspector. So all that said, we're going to go ahead and turn this baby on and see what it does. But we're going to see how it's going to go. So we're going to crack this open just to kind of see the water flow and see what happens. and go from there. Well, it's working. I'm getting very little water on the floor. It's almost all going in the bucket. I have to say, I feel like that was a successful test run. I'm going to make a slight adjustment where I'm going to put a piece of tape around this bag opening to direct it a little more narrow. But I got to say, I'm very happy with that. All right, I've got you guys zoomed in here. I put a little bit of tape around this thing, and I'm going to time it this time. I'm going to run it for, we'll say, a minute, and to make sure we're within spec. So... All right, that was 1 minute. So we're at 13 gallons in 1 minute. That's well within spec.
Tom, nice to meet you.
You kind of got the B team. My son is the person that installed it, but I'm retired, so he's working.
Perfect.
I put a pressure gauge on the hose bib just in case you had to check pressure. I didn't know if you had to or not on the water system right out here.
Sure. Yeah. And then is the sprinkler head in there already?
No. So that's the test fixture. We have the sprinkler head right here. This is...
Okay, but there's a sprinkler, broken one up there.
Yes, there is.
You've already popped the...
Yes.
In the deflectors?
Oh, yeah. It's all gone. It's
gone?
All, yeah.
Perfect.
Yep.
Because I only take showers on Saturday, so...
Yeah, it's all gone.
Okay. And... Okay, so the pressure gauge is on this side, but I can look over there.
But yeah, for the whole system, I have it on the hose bib right there.
Okay, I'll take a quick gander at it. Is it open already?
Yes, it is open. And he marked the inside of the trash can. I brought a flashlight because it's hard to see the marks without a flashlight that's in there.
Perfect. You guys are all set. Only house you're doing, or are you going to do some more?
Well, I'm retired. If my son takes on more, okay, I'll help him.
Okay, gotcha.
But not me personally. No, I'm too old for this stuff on a routine basis.
So we'll just do a 30-second flow test. Okay. And on 3, we'll get you to turn the quarter throw.
All right.
Get my clock reset here.
Just ready when you tell me to go.
Okay, on 3 then. 1, 2, 3.
A little slow on the uptake there, but
that's okay. That sounds like plenty of water. I only do this 7 times a day, so.
Yeah.
So we're at what's that? 7?
7, yeah, about 7
so
right there.
14 gallons a minute. What type of head do we have here?
This is, I think it says, is it Orobon? Is that the name of them? I don't.
Let's see here. Did he get it off our parts cut sheet?
Well, he has it over here, and yeah. So
okay,
I'm sure
so
he
it's
did.
probably in the 9 gallon a minute, because I honestly cannot.
Let me see if I can see what that says on. And I guess he said that I need to show you that we had the proper wrench for installing it, and the container plate and all that stuff. So he told me to have it laying out here.
So what will happen, because we don't have a second story over?
Yes.
I'll release the hole.
Okay.
I'm assuming Nick or Troy, or your building inspector.
Yeah.
One of the two of them. I'll release the hole and it says okay to cover.
Great.
So you can start doing your sheetrock and everything. And then I'll put a note in there that Troy or Nick can actually inspect after you get the sheetrock up and painted and everything.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, take the paint head off and then put that trim plate up.
Got it. Okay.
So, and he'll sign that off as a final at that point.
All right, we passed the inspection. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the test assembly and install the real sprinkler head. So I've turned off the well, or if you don't have a well, you could turn off the main water to the house, and I've opened a spigot on the downstream side of this pipe to minimize the amount of water coming out, and very few drips came out. So, this type of sprinkler head from Uponor requires this ring. And this ring locks the T-assembly onto the bracket, and it needs to be installed before the sprinkler head is installed. So hopefully, it's still hand tight, which it is. So we push that ring up onto the T-assembly. And then drop a wrench. We're going to thread our sprinkler head in. We're going to install the cap, the protective cap, which will stay installed until after insulation is complete. So now that I've put that in there and I have Teflon tape on, I'm going to go turn the water back on and check for leaks. So we're checking for leaks at this upper joint. This shroud housing is not a watertight boundary, obviously, so the internal sprinkler head threads into the T-assembly. This is this is the retainer clip that I slid onto the T-assembly that holds the T-assembly into the bracket. And I don't see any leaks. So this is going to wrap up the single sprinkler head install in a residential home. This is in Pierce County in Washington State. This is one of the newer requirements. I've never actually had to do this before, so I got to learn all about this, and I definitely have a new appreciation for sprinkler heads. As you saw, I got to set one off. I made a tool, so I didn't have to pay $160 for the tool to install and remove the sprinkler heads. I learned about all the inspections. I had to build a test assembly. We got the barrel set up. We performed the test. As you guys saw, we did a dry run. Test passed. The permanent sprinkler head is installed and is ready for sheetrock. There's a lot of really useful information throughout this whole video all about this sprinkler head assembly. I highly recommend that you find out from your local county what your requirements are. I really stressed out about this one, I gotta be honest. I had never done this before, and I was concerned that there would be issues. It turned out there wasn't. It went flawlessly, but I really took the time to do all the research and reading and understanding and getting all the tech sheets, providing the correct paperwork to the inspector when he showed up. All of those things were dialed in exactly how they were supposed to be. Overall, it was pretty simple, I gotta be honest. It was not difficult. Way overstressed about it, way more than I should. I suspect that's what a lot of you guys do out there also. So I hope you guys learned a bunch from this. I hope you definitely got some useful information out of it. And if you wouldn't mind checking out some of these links, I'll have the house series of videos, my garage series, the tractor series of videos, and definitely hit that subscribe button. It always helps me out in the long run. Until the next time, thanks for watching.